Welcome back to Invest in SqFt, the show where we cut through the noise and get real about the wins, losses, and everything in between. I'm your host, Matt Shields, and today's guest, Carlos Samaniego, is bringing the heat. From racking up almost $100,000 in tax debt to losing his job, Carlos hit rock bottom and then flipped the script. Now he's helping others get out of their own tax nightmares and thrive. If you've ever felt stuck, stressed, or just ready to throw in the towel, you need to hear this one. Let's jump in.
The story goes there is that when I was actually working in the ambulance field, I was doing a lot of overtime during the holiday seasons. And I think it was like my first year or two doing that type of work. And the older guy, and when I say older, remember, I'm a 19-year-old, I'm a young kid, right? So the older guy was maybe 20, 21. Carlos, why are you working so much? And I'm like, hey, trying to make money for the holidays. He's just claimed 10 exemptions on your paycheck stuff. They're not going to take the taxes. You're going to get a bigger paycheck. You don't have to work as much. But that's what I ended up doing. And that first year rolls around. They're not taking out taxes. I end up getting the returns prepared, and I got a big tax balance. And I did what a lot of people do when you got a big tax balance. You'll be shocked the way people do this. They just don't file the tax return. They're like, if I don't follow it, they don't know I owe. I don't have to pay. Unfortunately, that's not how the tax system works. And literally the following year turned into 2 years, turned into 3 years. It literally went 8 years. So I'm making money in the ambulance, making really good money on the ambulance job, making some pretty good money on my side hustles, my network marketing businesses, was making pretty good money there. And then here I am, 8 years of unfiled tax returns.
Wow.
Getting close to $100,000 of combined tax debt between the IRS and the state of California. And yeah, that was a big wake-up call right there. And that's where the whole tax stuff started working, is that I had known what was going on. And then my life had a big switch or turnaround. Was I actually lost my job as an ambulance driver, 11 years after being hired there, for something very simple. It tends to happen when you drive an ambulance. You have to have a specific type of ambulance driver's license, a specific type of insurance, and you're not allowed to get in car accidents or vehicle accidents. And make a long story short, I ended up getting into 2 accidents in the 1 year time frame. And the ambulance company came to me saying, hey, we can't insure you to be on this ambulance.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to stick you in an office job. And I said, what's my other option? Because when you're used to working 10 days a month, and now they're telling you got to work 5 days a week, going out, or at least for a year, because it takes a year for that to clear up. I said, what was my option? They're like, either you quit or we don't have to fire you. And I had decided, did my mental calculation. I'm not going to quit because I know if you fire me, I actually get unemployment. And that's what I did. And the only reason I wasn't too worried about it, I was actually making a pretty good income, a side income from all these side hustles I was doing. I took the unemployment, and literally it was at that time, and this would have been my my late 20s, I went full-time entrepreneur. I became an entrepreneur full-time right after that.
And so when you were going through and you had all of these different side hustles, was this all underneath your own name? You didn't have any other type of businesses or anything you were doing?
No corporations. Not like, everybody nowadays is running out to start an LLC or S Corp.
Yeah.
Also sole proprietorship income. That would have.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit, because again, I feel like this is one of those things that some entrepreneurs get themselves into, and then it propels into, like you explained, this element of embarrassments and feeling ashamed that you have to file these taxes, and it keep just sticking your head in the sand. So what did you do to start getting that process forward to get current on your taxes? What did that look like for you?
It's a great question. As you said, when people have tax problems, like I did at that time, I talk about it in my book, is that it's a secret nobody wants to talk about. When you're in that type of tax situation and you haven't filed taxes or owe large amounts of money, Matt, who do you go to? Do you go to your family members, say, hey, I know $100,000 in taxes, or I haven't filed my returns in years? We always say finances is one of the most guarded secrets we all have. Most people don't talk about their finances to friends or family members, right? Nobody wants to know about that. And that's where I was at the time. I didn't know what to do. After 1 or 2 years, yeah, a lot of times just file your tax return, but you start getting into 4, 5, 6, 8, and I've had clients now 20 years of unfiled returns.
Wow.
Go
Wow.
through with that. Or
Yeah.
something you're thinking, I'm going to go to prison because I haven't filed tax returns, right? But fortunately, I wasn't thinking that at the time. When I had lost that job with the ambulance company, here I am. I'm still making money, not really filing my taxes, not filing taxes at all. But it wasn't too long after that, the state of California actually caught up with me. I actually got a letter, which this is very typical. Not the IRS catches you, is your local state catches you.
Yeah.
They'd caught me. They sent me a letter basically saying, hey, we didn't receive your last year's tax returns. And I'm full well knowing it's been like 8 years, let alone 8. But what ended up happening there is I had to respond to that letter because they will come after your bank accounts, will come after any income that you have. Responded to the letter. And I remember them saying, hey, we want all these years tax returns. And I didn't know what to do. So I started the process of filing a few of those returns, which kind of took the heat off, and they almost forgot about me again. And that's all I can think, because I'm kind of remember back. They must have forgot because I really didn't continue dealing with it. And during this time frame, we're talking 2004, 2005 time frame. And at this time, I just lost that job, didn't know what to do here. And a friend had told me, hey, there's a local company, Chase Manhattan Mortgage, was hiring and they're looking for lenders. This is the pre-bubble time frame. Yeah. And I remember applying for a job there, and I applied at the local Chase department, Chase Manhattan Mortgage, and I had no idea why in the hell they hired me. But they did. They hired me as a lender. Sent me off to New York City to learn mortgage lending, and then started making some really good money doing mortgage lending. Obviously, they didn't do a background check because they didn't know about my unfiled tax returns. The interesting part there, Matt, is you asked what caused you to finally deal with it. What caused me to deal with it was the young lady that came in there looking for a mortgage. She came in there looking for a mortgage, and I met her. We started talking. I took her off to lunch, and that first lunch I had with her, I knew I was married. I met that girl. Literally, we went to lunch, and 2 years later, we ended up getting married. And it wasn't until after I married her, and here's the scumbag in me, I never told her about the unfiled tax returns. I never told her about the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, not hundred, but up to almost $100,000 of tax debt that I owed. And I married her, and I knew what I just did. I knew that she just married into a tax nightmare.
Yeah.
I have come to that realization. I have to do something today, literally now. And then I just started doing research on who can help me to do this, to figure out my problem. And fortunately for me, when I found that person, we could go there, but when I found that person, I finally came to her. I decided I was going to go to her and tell her once I had a way of telling her I'm going to get it resolved, because if they force me or stick around. And fortunate for me, she didn't force me. She's actually the co-founder of our company. She's working right over my shoulder right now.
That's great. That's great. So you came clean with this. What did the process look like? Was it as painful as what you would imagine, or what does this look like?
Yeah, believe it or not, it's funny when I hear people that have gone through bankruptcy. A lot of times they'll say something like, "I wish I'd done it earlier. It wasn't as bad as I thought." And when I had met Ernie was the guy that actually helped me. He was a former IRS agent, EA. I remember going to his office literally a week before Christmas and sitting down with him at his desk. And he said, "Carlos, you know what? Don't be afraid. You're a good person. You just made bad choices in your life, and we're going to get this fixed. And I don't want you to worry about it, because I'm going to do everything I need to even do to get back into compliance with the IRS, which is what they want, to get this tax problem resolved." That day, Matt, a ton of bricks just came off my shoulders, because literally from the age of 21 to now, I'm 35 years old. This had been weighing on me my entire life, just not knowing what to do during this time frame. And there have been many times I talk about in my book where For years, I thought I had a heart problem because I would get these palpitations. My heart would just thump. I wouldn't be able to sleep. And now looking back, what it was just stress and anxiety and dealing with that problem was just weighing on me so much.
Yeah.
When I actually had that conversation, that was the first time in years I was able to sleep, realizing that this is going to get resolved. And then he just went through the 3 simple steps, I call them, to resolve my tax problem. And you just took it one step at a time. And then eventually this tax problem was completely resolved. And here I am today. Now this is what I do for B.
Yeah. Yeah. How long of a process is this? What is this? Does it matter how many past years of taxes you have, or what?
No, that's a great question, Matt. It depends. It really depends on how complicated the situation is. It depends if you're a business owner, you're W-2. It depends. A lot of it depends on what's happening with the IRS. As an example, during COVID, basically 2020, about 4 years ago, right up until now, it's been almost impossible getting anything done with the IRS. During COVID, the IRS pretty much effectively shut down. They sent everybody home. They weren't opening mail. A lot of the mail that was being sent was being put into storage boxes and put away. So trying to get anything resolved over the last 4 years has been almost impossible. The states have been a totally different story. The states have been actively collecting. They didn't even care, but IRS has been pretty much not doing anything. And for a lot of people out there that might be listening to this, a lot of times they must have forgot about me because I haven't gotten any letters for the last 4 years. So I must have just flew under the radar. And I tell them all the time, it's not that you flew under the radar, is that they effectively shut down. So they weren't even allowed to send out letters, collection letters for unfiled returns or past due balances. Obviously, if you had asked me a year ago, how long does it take? The honest question is, I don't know, because we're working on their time frame. Fortunately, and unfortunately, the IRS, we've all heard that IRS got billions of dollars of funding. As much as people hate the IRS and the news media made it sound like this is an evil thing, they really do need the funding because they don't have enough employees just to service consumers. And if anybody's been here, picked up the phone and tried to contact all the IRS because they got a letter, I actually just start, I got a stack of IRS letters that came in today. It's about that high. If they wouldn't try to call, it could take days to get through. I've literally had people, I've been calling for days and nobody answers the phone. And the reason is they don't have enough employees to answer the phone. So in a lot of ways, a lot of the funding that they're going to get, it's going to be really helpful to consumers that need to talk to them and try to get something resolved. But I'm assuming everything's back on board with the Christian theme, people back to work. So sometimes the problem can be resolved in literally a couple of days, or the more complicated things. And usually the most complicated thing that could take the longest amount of time is what we hear on the radio, the offer and compromise selling tax debt for pennies on the dollar. Those to 2 years. So it really depends. It just depends on your situation.
And is there any reason why? Because if you're in that situation, you all owe all of this money. That sounds like a really promising solution, is settling with them for pennies on the dollar or whatever it is. Is there any reason why you wouldn't want to do that? Are there repercussions, or how does that impact you?
That's the option people always hear about. It's something they're all right. Because if you do your car radio, you hear it nonstop or on late night television. And that is an option the IRS has. Unfortunately, what a lot of people don't realize, it's an option that you have to qualify to get. And they're basically they want to make sure you ain't got any, think about it. If you owe, I got a case I'm thinking about in my head. Guy owes $300,000 of tax debt, right? And he doesn't own any real estate. He doesn't have any retirement account. Then pretty much has no assets whatsoever. He's not an WG job that it's basically barely paying the bills that the IRS allows. A lot of people think the IRS just wants to rip you apart and leave you out in the streets, and they don't. There's strict rules that they got to make sure that you can pay for your mortgage, your rent, clothing, utilities, car payment. They want to make sure you can still live and you can still earn an income, right? So if we add up all those numbers and there's nothing left to be able to pay them, then there's a very good possibility you might qualify for something like that. But then you get somebody else that called me, and this just happened. Guy owes $250,000 and he said, can I get an offer and compromise? I'm like, Okay, you got $500,000 of equity in your home. You own a McLaren. I don't even know what a McLaren car was. I guess it looks like a Ferrari. You own a McLaren. You drive it's just not going to happen. And your income, his income was like $20,000 a month, and there was still $10,000 a month. That's just not going to happen. And it's unfortunate that a lot of the media advertising out there makes it seem like everybody qualifies for that. There's a lot of companies that make it sound like everybody's going to qualify, and they're really scam companies just trying to get you to pay them. And they know full well you're not going to qualify for something like that.
Yeah. If someone is in this situation, like, what should they look for? Like you said, there's these companies that advertise all of these different options and whatnot.
Right.
Is that the path that they should go, or is there a better way to be able to qualify the person you're going to work with?
Yeah. I always tell people, stay away from the big corporate companies. A lot of the major and you see them on TV, radio. A lot of those, I don't know, do you remember Matt, do you remember the movie Boiler Room?
Oh yeah. Yep.
There's a bunch of salespeople. They're basically just trying to sell you a bunch of scam stuff.
Yep.
A lot of those companies exist today. They're literally salespeople that are calling people with tax debt. If you get a tax lien, it's public record. So that's all they're doing. And they're just making promises they know is not going to fit. And these salespeople make like huge commissions. They make, I've heard 30 to 50% of the fee that they can collect right up front.
Wow.
So that's what you want to stay away with. You want to stick to a company or a person that specializes in dealing with tax resolution. And there's only 3 people in the country that can actually help you or legally represent you with your tax debt. They're attorneys, CPAs, and enrolled agents licensed by the IRS. I happen to be the third, a licensed enrolled agent. My license is a federal license that comes from the Department of Treasury, and we're legally able to represent you. Those are only the 3 legal people that you can talk to. So I always tell people, if you're talking to somebody on the phone, my first question would be, are you an attorney, CPA, or an enrolled agent? Most of these companies, they're not. It's a salesperson. So watch what you want to find out. And then once you find somebody that can legally represent you, what you want to do is find out what's your experience in dealing with tax resolution, dealing with tax problem. Like, that's all I do. I'm not the office that you call because you need to file next year's taxes. That's not what I do. All I deal with are tax problems. So all I deal with are IRS problems or state problems. Every day, that's all we do. And there are people throughout the country, that's all they do. And that's who you want to go to, because they're the ones that are experienced dealing with the IRS, knowing the rules that are changing on a constant basis. Those are the kind of people you want to look for. Or just call me.
Got it. And does it make any difference whether or not it is maybe a business that might owe the taxes, or whether or not it's personal? Like, you'd be able to handle both?
Yeah, we do. We deal with them both. A lot of entrepreneurs tend to get, if you think about it, I would say 80% of our cases tend to be entrepreneurs, people in the real estate industry, self-employed people. Just because if you think about it, a lot of entrepreneurs, right, we pay self-employment tax. We're supposed to be paying estimated taxes. A lot of times we don't, or we're selling real estate and then we end up with a big tax problem because something didn't happen the way it was supposed to, or you got bad tax advice and now you get this huge tax bills. No, we can legally represent both of them, whether it's a personal liability or a business liability.
Yep. That makes sense. And is there something that you should be doing? Like, what is the right cadence for people, right? Like you mentioned the quarterly payments and all of that. What should this look like if you're doing it the right way, if that makes sense?
And let me make sure I'm understanding. So let's just say somebody has a potential tax problem. Maybe they owe somebody. What should you be doing? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I guess if you, yes, yeah, let's go down that path. Yeah.
Sounds good. So I always tell people, every person that ever comes to me that deals with the tax problem, the number one thing that's very interesting, because I do free consultations when people have what they think is a tax problem. So I always ask them, tell me what's going on. It's really an open-ended question. And Matt, I can guarantee 9 out of 10 times, here's how they respond. I got a letter from the IRS and it says I owe money for 2016, but I thought it was 2020. The last time I filed, I think, was 2012. So a lot of times people don't even know what the problem is. Being a former EMT medic, being in the medical industry, I always tell people, when you go to a doctor and you're complaining of an ailment, let's just say it's a stomach problem, right? And you got this really bad stomach cramps and it just doesn't go away. And it doesn't feel right, but there's just something might be wrong. When you call your doctor, here's what he doesn't say. He doesn't say, hey, Matt, next Thursday, we're to get you ready for surgery and just dig in there and see what's going on. That's malpractice.
Yeah, right.
What the doctor would really say, let's do this. Let's get you over to the lab. Let's go get you over to the labs, get some blood work done, maybe get some x-rays to see what's going on. And I use that analogy to go back, same with the tax problem. A lot of people, they know something's wrong. They're getting some letters, but they're not really sure what's really happening. So first thing we do when we're dealing with the tax problem is we want to, what I call, investigate the liability, or do a discovery, find out what is going on with the IRS or with the state. We want to know what's going on in their head and why are they sending you letters, or why do they take money out of your bank account, or why are they coming up with the liability for $100,000 that they're trying to collect? We want to know what they know. And usually when we do that first phase, that investigation, what we're doing, we're filing a power of attorney to the IRS and the state, and then we are looking up everything that's going on. We get complete access to all their internal records. So I can literally come back to you and say, hey, Matt, based on what we're looking at, you haven't filed for this year and that year. The IRS made up a tax due for a certain year because you didn't file. You got some debt that's getting written, you expire. There's some older returns that you didn't file, but the IRS never assessed anything. We don't have to file those returns. And so I'm finding out all that information. So now that I've looked at the blood work here and looked at the labs, I know exactly what it's going to be the best way to proceed to the next step. Step two. So step one is let's find out what the problem is, because here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to start dealing with the problem and make it worse. And I got a perfect example on that, Matt. I actually had a guy that came here. He had over 10 years of unfiled tax returns. And he initially came to me for the consult, and I told him exactly what I just told you. I said, we don't want to make this thing worse. So we need to find out what's going on. And he decided at the time, he said, you know what, let me think about this and I'll come back to you, that's great. So he comes back to me a couple of months later, and he comes back with 10 manila envelopes, literally. And when he's, hey, Carlos, I'm really ready to use their services, I got these 10 manila with my tax returns, which is step two. Which is filing the return. That's step two, is just filing the tax return that you get filed. When I looked at that, I said, please tell me that you did not file all 10 years of those returns. And he goes, I went to H&R Block and they said I needed to file all the returns. I just filed them. Wow. If here's what he did, Matt, I already knew that the IRS was only going to ask for 6 of those years.
Yeah.
I don't want all 10 years. And the 4 years that he filed that the IRS never wanted added up to $100,000 of tax liability.
Wow.
And the IRS is going to come after him now for that $100,000 of those 4 years, not including all the other years that he did. So he made a $100,000 mistake because he was trying to save a little bit of money up front. And that's where I tell people, don't solve the tax problem until you actually know what the problem is. Because there are instances where there is no tax problem. I just had that one a couple of days ago. I went through a scenario. I'm like, based on what you're telling me, you don't have a tax problem. All you have is a filing problem. We file the tax returns. There's no more tax problem. It's done. And I feel bad for her, because it's just, for years, for years, like me, right? She went years not dealing with it, thinking she had this huge tax liability, and all she really got was a filing problem that we had to get fixed.
Interesting. So in that particular case, she was paying taxes the whole time and just not filing them, or?
She was paying taxes the whole time, just not filing the return. So she's automatically assuming that she's got this huge tax bill for not filing. We actually found out she had refunds almost for every year, and she had lost out on close to $40,000 of refunds because she didn't file.
Wow.
A lot of people don't realize that once you go through a year, any return that's older than 3 years, you won't get a refund if there's a refund there. IRS keeps the money.
Oh, wow. And how many years can they go back? Like you just said, that guy shouldn't have filed the 4 years. Is it 6, 7 years that they can go back?
This is there's a specific IRS rule that says 6 years is all that's needed to be considered tax compliant. Just 6 years. So as of today, that would be right. We just had 23 that was due.
Yeah.
23, 22, 20,
Yeah, so 18.
18. So 2018. Now
Got it.
this coming April, it's going to be 24. So they just need 19 going forward. But here's what's great about that rule. That's all they want. But sometimes the IRS or the state will actually file a return because you didn't file it. It's called a substitute return. That could, if you've gone longer than 6 years and the IRS did that to you or the state did that to you, you have the right to file that return to replace the assessment that they came up with. Because remember, when they do it, they don't give you any deductions. If you had the parents, you don't get that. If you were married, you don't get that. So sometimes it makes sense to do older returns. It just, again, it goes back to that investigation. I really think the investigation is the most important thing that needs to be done before doing anything.
Yeah, interesting. What about any type of strategies as far as write-offs or investments or anything like that? If someone has some type of a tax problem, is there anything that they can do to offset some of those problems, would you say?
It always comes down to this. First, again, it goes back to, we got to know what the problem is, right? Because there ain't a problem there. We just filed the returns. Then once the returns are filed, which is step 2. So I brought up the investigation. Step 2 is what we call compliance, which is file your returns that need to be filed. And then once that's done, now here's what we have. We actually know what the debt is, right? All these years you've gone, but now that you've done all the returns that need to be done, now the IRS knows exactly how much money you owe. And the most important debt, Matt, is literally, people always ask me, so what's the first debt I should pay? And I always tell them, it's not the old debt, it's next year's debt. Because what the IRS wants to make sure is that if we're going to deal with this old past due balance, you better not owe us money going forward. They want to stop, another medical analogy. We got to stop the bleeding. We got to put a turn in it. Because what's the use of solving your old debt if you just keep on adding more debt to it? That's what they want to figure out. So we're going to, once we know we're not going to owe taxes, let's just say for 2024, now we have this debt. You talk about what's the strategy. The strategy comes down to what are we going to do with this debt? Early, the final part, step 3 on my 3-part how to solve the tax debt is dealing with resolving the debt, the resolution of the debt.
Yep.
There's 4 major options that you have. You have either one, you can afford to pay back the debt. That's an installment agreement. So the debt is, once we know what the debt is and you have the financial means of paying back that debt, the IRS is going to be expected to get paid. They want to get paid.
Yeah.
Step 2 is, we talked about it earlier, offer a compromise. Maybe you don't have the ability to pay it. You don't have enough assets. You don't have enough income. And the IRS says, hey, there's a possibility we could sell this debt for pennies on the dollar. That's another option. The third option is called currently not collectible, CNC, currently not collectible. That's where the IRS says, not only do you have no assets that we can collect from, you don't have any income. So because you don't have either one of those, or maybe you do have an asset, but you can't get access to the money from the asset, the IRS just says, for now, we're just not going to collect. We're just going to leave it alone and put you on collectible status. That's a very powerful strategy a lot of people don't even realize it exists, because if you're in a not collectible status, there is a potential that debt could actually expire, because the IRS debt could only last for 10 years from when they fell out. So they got 10 years to collect on the debt once it's been assessed.
Interesting.
One of the strategies I'm doing when I do this investigation, I'm looking at the date of all of your debt that's going to expire. That's what I want to know, when's that debt, because that could completely change our strategy on how to deal with this thing.
Mm.
I got a great story. I live here in Southern California. Hollywood's not too far away. I had a movie producer, if the entertainment bill come to me, I'm dealing with tax debt way over $500,000. So when he comes to me, I do my investigation. I pull those records and I'm looking at it, and I see the date his debt is going to expire. $500,000 of the debt was going to expire. And I come back to him and we have a follow-up conversation going over the records. And I said, here's our strategy. We're going to do nothing 6 months. And Matt, he was actually really upset with me. He goes, what do you mean we're going to do that then? What did I hire you for? I said, you hired me to do that. I mean, that's what you hired me to do, because your debt is going to expire in 6 months. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to monitor your IRS account. We're going to make sure we respond to any letters that comes in. But our goal is to try to get to that date. Here's what happened. 6 months after that date, I called them up. He had $500,000 of debt expire.
Wow.
So
Wow.
just, these are the things that we need to find out before we deal with the tax debt. The final strategy I said, so we have the installment agreement, offer and compromise, currently not collectible. So those are the three major IRS things. Bankruptcy, believe it or not, is an option. Bankruptcy is an option because some tax debt can be bankrupted. And I've had clients, and I work with bankruptcy attorneys, that I'm like, you know what, you got a lot of consumer debt, you got tax debt that qualifies. There's strict guidelines on what qualifies to be bankrupted. I think we need to be talking to a bankruptcy attorney to see if that's a feasible option for you. So
Interesting. Yeah, I had no idea some of these things were out there, and I'm assuming that a lot of people fall into that as well. Is there anything else that?
there is one, if this is a subcategory of the installment agreement, there is a thing called a partial pay installment agreement. The partial pay installment agreement basically says that you can't afford the minimum monthly payment. And a lot of people don't realize that the IRS has a minimum monthly payment based on your tax debt. And every tax, as an example, every tax year that you owe has a different minimum monthly payment. And the older the tax debt, the bigger the amount. Because remember, let's go back to that 10-year rule, right? The IRS has to collect the debt in 10 years. So if you have a debt that's been around for 5 years and you never made a payment, how many years you got left to pay on that? 5 years. The minimum monthly payments can be potentially pretty high. So if that is the case, the IRS has this minimum monthly payment, but if we do your finances, it says you can't afford $8,000 a month, but you can afford $500 a month based on your financial. So what we use, we go to the IRS and say, hey, we can't do the 8,000, we can do the 500. Will you accept that? And as long as everything matches up, the IRS will accept that $500 a month. And here's the great news. The great news is that you're only paying $500 a month, and that tax debt time clock continues to tick. It could eventually expire.
Wow. Interesting. Even if it's assessed, they still have 10 years to collect it. Is that right?
Yeah, 10 years from assessment. So as an example, any tax debt, let's just say in 2014, you filed a tax return and you had a tax debt. 2014, typically it's going to be 10 years from after when it was actually filed. So as an example, a 2014 tax debt, you filed that when? April 2015, right? So it's 10 years from that date, that 2015 assessment date. So looking at my calendar here, if I'm looking at your 14 debt, there's a very good chance that 14 debt's going to expire April of next year, roughly 7 months from now.
Yeah. Interesting.
Thing with where people are going to be very vigilant of these dates. If the IRS hasn't collected in 4 years because of COVID, some of these debts are potentially expiring over the next couple of years, and you had no idea it's going to expire. Now, there are other things that can happen where you can add more time to that. If you file the bankruptcy during that time frame, the IRS has to add more time because you were in bankruptcy and they weren't allowed to attempt to collect. So there are little nuances like that, but that's what the tax person is there to do, is to figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah. This is, like I said, I had no idea that some of these things were out there. So this is all really good information. I feel like this is a good time to switch to the life crafting portion of this. So again, just for the listeners, this is something that I started doing about a year ago or so, where every Sunday line up or lay out the goals for the week, and then the action steps that I need to take to be able to achieve what those goals were. And what I realized was that a lot of times I was just guessing with some of these things that I had to do. So I like to chat with the amazing entrepreneurs that we have here on the show and ask them some of the things that they're doing. So we like to ask, the question is, what is your highest ROI activity? And then we get into some of the steps that they take to be able to achieve whatever those steps might be to be able to achieve that goal. So yeah, so Carlos, if I asked you, what is your highest ROI activity, what would you say that would be?
We had mentioned it right before the show, is that I deal in very high stress job. Being an entrepreneur is a high stress job. Here's what we got, right? We're doing 20 different jobs at one time. We're dealing with finances, things like that. So just being your own small business owner is stressful. Now, my job, people say IRS tax problems freak them out. I've got hundreds of cases of people's IRS tax problems. So stress is a very high level thing. In fact, my mentor had told me, Ernie, don't let the job kill you, because the stress factor can kill you. And I remember 20 years ago when me and my wife first got married, I had heard about this thing called Transcendental Meditation. And I was curious, like, what the heck is Transcendental Meditation? So we had actually went to a class out in Palm Springs, about 35 minutes from here. And the class was all about the benefits of taking time and just quieting your mind and just having some peace in your mind, because, well, we're 24/7, right? With phones and work, and I got a teenage daughter. We got all this stuff going on, right? And we didn't do nothing. At the time, I'm like, oh, I'm not sure if I want to invest a few $100s, whatever it was, to do it. Flash forward 20 years. And this last summer, I happened to be on the YouTube rabbit hole watching YouTube videos. And I watched an interview with Jerry Seinfeld. And they literally asked the question that you asked: what is the one thing which was the best investment of time? And he said, learning Transcendental Meditation back in my 20s. Learning how to quiet my mind twice a day, 20 minutes in the morning, 20 in the afternoon. And I was like, wow, that's that thing that we actually looked into. Then I watched the next video. He's being interviewed by Howard Stern. And he asked Howard Stern the same question. Little did he didn't even know that Howard Stern did Transcendental Meditation. Then I started studying all these other videos of all these billionaires just raving about this. And I'm like, okay, I need to go back and look into this. So there happened to be another class in Palm Springs. I actually bought it as a gift for my wife and I. You went down there and we started doing this. It's like an hour class, and they just teach you how to quiet your mind. That's all it is. A lot of people just call it peaceful meditation, being quiet. So it's whatever, how the way you want to call it, just stay specific. How to sit down and quiet your mind and get all those spots out for 20 minutes. Once in the morning, once in the afternoon. Man, that has been the best thing that's ever happened to me. I literally wake up purposely now, like at 5:30, sometimes 5 a.m., just to do that 20 minutes. Because all of us think that we all have time. I just got to get up a little bit earlier just so I can do it. And that, I've been taking blood pressure medication probably 20 years now. And low dose blood pressure, but my blood pressure still was always pretty high. After doing 6 months of this, my blood pressure is normalized with no medication.
Wow.
Which has shocked me to the point where my wife watches me and I'm taking my blood pressure. She's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, I still don't believe that my blood pressure had normalized and I'm not even taking medication.
Yeah.
The only thing that's changed are me 20 minutes in the afternoon or 20 minutes in the morning, which I try to do religiously. The afternoon one gets a little tough sometimes just because we're rushing from work, got to make dinner, got to go on daughter, it's just activity. But I try to get that 20 minutes in the afternoon. So to me, that's been the best 20 minutes of my life, because we all know blood pressure can lead to strokes, a whole host of medical.
Yeah. Yep. What is the process look like for you to perform the Transcendental Meditation? And and I'll say that one of the things that I've understood, and I don't know if I've ever done this type before, but the way that I've always understood meditation is, again, you mentioned quieting your mind. And for me, the way that it was explained to me is like every couple of seconds or 10 seconds, 20 seconds, You might be able to blank out your mind, but your mind is going to start thinking about something. So the way that it's been explained to me is think about your breathing, concentrate on your breathing, the in and out, and actually seeing the air flowing in and out of your nose. And that quiets your mind. That gets rid of the things that you're thinking about. So it's basically, if you start thinking about something, remember to start thinking about your breath or your air, or your breathing. And that brings you back to this element that you're not thinking about anything again. Is that basically what it is? Or is there other techniques?
They're similar. I think the only thing that's slightly different, and it's very similar. You're thinking about your breathing, but again, if you're thinking about your breathing, what are you doing?
You're thinking about something. Yeah.
The goal is just to have no thoughts, which is that we all know it's impossible not to have any thoughts, right? So what they do, and I encourage you to go, they do these free workshops all the time. They just give you a word. It's a word that has no meaning whatsoever. Sometimes it's just a sound, that little word. And I have mine. And when I just sit down and as I sit there and just do nothing, here's what happens. Everything starts popping up in your head when you're doing nothing. And I'll just repeat the same word, the same mantra you want to call it. It's a word or a sound. And I just repeat that. And then eventually what happens is that you're not thinking something, but here's what always happens. Something else pops in your head. You just repeat it again. I actually did a little deep dive and actually spoke to the teacher about this. He goes, what's happening is stress is being relieved from your body. Every time you get a thought and you're able to push out that thought, it's literally stress being relieved out of your body. As our mind is just constantly, this computer never shuts down. Have you ever sat down at your computer, your computer, and you hear your computer just like struggling to go?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because what's happening is so much memories in there, it's not able to function. And what do we normally do? Just shut it down, give it a little bit of a break, turn it back on, and we'll try to be normal again, right? It's what we're doing with that brain. It's just literally doing that process. Is thinking while you're sitting there not wanting to think is a normal process. Our goal is just to stop thinking. And some days I have really good where I barely don't think anything, but other days it's just nonstop. The brain just doesn't want to stop. And I find that when that happens, it's usually one of the most stressful days that I've had.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't realize that's a great explanation that it's stress leaving your mind. Yeah, that is really interesting. Yeah, really
when
interesting.
I go back thinking about those videos I watch, I came to this realization: who am I to judge people that are worth literally Jerry Seinfeld $1 billion? All these,
Yeah,
if they're doing something and they're saying this isn't the best thing ever, okay,
yeah. There's got to be something there.
investigate a little bit more.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, that success always leaves clues. When you come across those types of things, you want to pay attention. Carlos, this has been fantastic. If people want to learn more about you or your services, what would be the best way to find out more?
You can always go to my website, taxdebtconsultant.com, singular, tax debt consultant. Everything about me is on there, contact information. And another option for your listeners or watchers, you can pick up my book, How to Make the IRS an Offer They Can't Refuse. And you can go to taxthatbook.com, or if you go to the primary website, there's an option there to pick up. And at least you can get the PDF version of this book. Normally sells, I think it's $15 on Amazon. Just get the PDF version, put it on your Kindle, and we'll leave it that way.
Beautiful. Excellent, Carlos. I appreciate the time, and I think that this is going to help out quite a few people here. So I appreciate all the insights.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Invest in SqFt. Big shout out to Carlos Samaniego for keeping it raw and sharing how he turned his chaos into success. Got tax problems or just wanted to learn more? Hit him up at taxdebtconsultant.com or grab his book, How to Make the IRS an Offer They Can't Refuse. If this episode lit a fire under you, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, stay bold, keep building, and don't settle for anything less than what you deserve.